Hey everybody, welcome back to RB&D Reviews. I'm Rob.
And I'm Dave.
Not too long ago, we were looking on the internet, and Marvel announced that they found a new director to take over their upcoming superhero movie, Ant-Man. Originally, it was going to be directed by Edgar Wright, as many of you know, did what's the so-called Cornetto trilogy with, Hot Fuzz, Shaun of the Dead, and The World's End, and he also directed a terrific picture called Scott Pilgrim. And we were talking about, a long conversation about nobody knows who Ant-Man is and stuff like that, and we started throwing some theories around, and we're like, hey, why don't we just turn the camera on and we'll share our thoughts with you guys, and you can share your thoughts as well.
Yeah.
All right, so and we also got comfortable. We got drinks. I got my tea. He's got his water, and he's got his cookies laying right over here. Marvel's been branching out into other comic books that aren't really well-known characters. Like they're taking a risk with Guardians of the Galaxy and Ant-Man, and So what do you think of? You were telling me that you don't think that these movies are going to do very well. Why?
Yeah. Well, it's first of all, who is Ant-Man? I don't even know. It's like. I have a feeling that was like a superhero from like our parents' time and whatnot, and a lot of kids nowadays are not even going to know who that is.
Yeah, I did some research. He first appeared in a comic book back in 1962.
Yeah, see, we weren't even around in '62.
Obviously, but yeah, because Marvel is taking a risk with these super. Like I remember not too long ago, you just told me you tried talking to comic book store owners, and what did their reaction?
They don't even know. They didn't even know who Ant-Man was. So I'm starting to think that are starting to make up comic book characters that were never even in comic books to begin with, just to get people to go see things.
And you also thought about trying to get old people in the theater?
Yeah, if they're bringing back like old superheroes that kids nowadays don't even know about, then maybe that's what they're trying to do, is get older people from that were kids in the 60s when those things were popular back into theaters and whatnot.
I don't quite agree with that. I think what Marvel's trying to do, Dave, is they're trying to get these somewhat forgotten superheroes back into the public consciousness, especially with the younger people. Guardians of the Galaxy was, from what I read, was never a popular comic book characters, but they're taking a risk with them. They're going to be tied in with the third Avengers movie somehow. The villain has already appeared in the credits of the Avengers already, so there's already a tie-in. So they're taking a risk with that. And I think that's kind of like what they tried doing with the Green Lantern at DC. That he's not as popular as Batman or Superman. And a few years ago they tried making a movie with him, and it kind of did very well at the box office. However, a lot of fans were, not happy with it for one reason or another. So I think what Marvel is trying to do is they're trying to take their huge catalog of superheroes and try to get them back into so people are, get reacquainted with these characters and try to get off from them.
They should really, what they should do is maybe, re-release some of the old comic books themselves first, so that kids nowadays can actually look through them and then make their own judgment as whether or not these are going to be the same equivalent to Superman or Batman or Spider-Man in their ideal.
Well, I think if you go to some old comic book shops, you might be able to find some of them. And plus, I think what they might do is they might re-release them. They might release the movie, and if people kind of have a good reaction to it, they might start these series back up again or make them available again.
Yeah.
I've been following these Marvel movies, and it's been kind of interesting because a lot of people, a lot of the Marvel fans are really wish that some of these superhero movies like Spider-Man and X-Men were controlled by the Marvel movies for a lot of different reasons. Since the Avengers came out and some of those characters are tied in with the Avengers, they're like, how come Spider-Man isn't being made by Marvel Studios and X-Men? Now, when those two movies recently came out, there was a huge thing, because what happened is X-Men there's some characters that are still held out from other studios. For example, X-Men is still owned by Fox, and Columbia still owns Spider-Man. And a lot of people are like, well, why can't those movie studios give them back to Marvel so they can make these movies? The fanboys are complaining, and I'm like, well, obviously these movie studios still feel like they're valuable properties. Yeah. And I know what happened was, a lot of people I think forget this. Back in the maybe a couple decades ago, when superhero movies were making a comeback, they you know, with X-Men, you know, a lot of movies, Marvel did what they would do. Movie studios wanted to get involved in the superhero movie business. They got the rights to the characters for a period of time. Like Fox, I think, had Daredevil and Elektra. I can't remember what movie studio had Ghost Rider, and another movie studio had the Punisher. So all the characters got spread out. But the thing is, a lot of the characters got reverted back to Universal had the Hulk for a while, and over time, a lot of the characters reverted back to Marvel. Like Fox lost the right to Daredevil and Elektra because I guess the deal is you make these movies for a certain period of time, and and then after a while, if you don't, you know, do what you're supposed to do and make them every so often, they get reverted back. So I think that's why Sony held on to Spider-Man and X-Men, because they still think, and they're rebooting Fantastic Four, so they still think they're valuable properties.
Yeah.
So that's why those two characters will not be at this time part of the Avengers series, because they're still being owned by movie studios.
Right. But I mean, a lot of those other ones, they were, you know, they're still pretty much popular, and a lot of people knew about their comics before they were made into movies. I mean, and then there was some that they didn't really know about the comics, but they figured maybe it was just a different push to make some other kind of movie, like Elektra. I've never seen her comics either, but I figured, you know, maybe it's just like another like action movie type thing that they were just making.
Well, Elektra was in the Daredevil movie. I mean, when these superhero movies came out, I'm sure the comic book fans, you know, came out and saw them. It's because, I mean, Iron Man, I was familiar with him because he appeared in some of the Marvel cartoon characters, and I mean, he up until before Robert Downey Jr. played the part, he wasn't really well known either. And now look at the character now. He's been in 3 films. He's been in the Avengers as well. So, and he's going to be in 2 more Avengers. So, I mean, it depends. I mean, I think if you make the movie, I would argue when these trailers come out, if they look attractive to moviegoers, they'll come out and see it, and even if they've never heard of these characters. Like, I didn't really know about Thor. I knew who Captain America was because he's a Marvel icon, but I went and saw these movies because you know they looked interesting. I would argue that I thought the Guardians of the Galaxy trailer looked interesting enough where I'd like to see it. I bet you if the Ant-Man movie looks really good, people are probably gonna at least give it a shot.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of think it's a waste of time because it's just kind of something, you know, cliche. And like I said, I went to several other comic book stores to ask about Ant-Man, and they pretty much couldn't even tell me about it. So, like I said, I'm thinking maybe it's more just like made up, but. No, but if there really was comics in the 60s, then maybe it was something that just flopped and wasn't as popular as like Spider-Man or Batman or Superman. So
yeah, well, I mean, Marvel has a lot of characters. I think they're trying to get out there, like they're trying to get Doctor Strange out there now and several others. So I mean, they got a lot of characters to draw from. So, I mean, granted, I never heard of Ant-Man, but I mean, so far, for the most part, I've really enjoyed the Marvel comic book movies, and I want to see how this one turns out. So.